Dr. Gallo, I have a couple of questions. Um,
Yeah.
These exercise, like all of the, I often receive this a lot from my clients when I do breathing exercises and energy work. Um, this exercise can be seen as a little bit kind of weird.
Mm.
What would you say about that?
Oh, yeah. It's very, very weird. Okay. And, I guess I'm a weird kind of guy because I like weird. Okay. How- When I first saw this stuff, I mentioned that when I first saw what Dr. Callahan was doing, I thought this is strange. This guy, he's lost his bearings. Okay. I mean, and I had this image in my mind because I heard he was living in California in the desert. And I didn't know what that meant, just desert. And I had this image of this guy who was in a disheveled uh, shack, and he had hair down to his knees, and he was all scabby, and long beard, and he's just dirty. He hadn't washed for weeks, and uh, and here he was this clinical psychologist who worked with people that had phobias, and he just wasn't getting anywhere. And then he got this delusional idea that the answer was to have people tap on their bodies. Okay, and so so I thought, this, and I laughed because that was the image I had. Well, then I later find out that he did, while he lived in the desert, he lived in a beautiful area in the desert. He lived in Indian Wells, California, and he lived in a gated community, really, and beautiful house, has a swimming pool there, and his wife Joanne, and I got to know them very well. And I mean, he had a beard, but it was a very well kept beard. He didn't have hair down his knees, and he was very successful. And but what had happened is when he discovered this technique of tapping, it cleaned out his whole practice. He had all these people that he's been working with for a long time, and he could help them cure their phobias very, very quickly. And
Oh
next
my
thing you
gosh.
know, he says, I went broke, kind of. Okay. And but then the news started spreading about how effective he was. Okay, he had to raise his fee because it didn't take very long for him to help somebody. So
Yeah,
instead of charging standard fee, he charged a lot, but they got their money's worth. I would say, and so I got to know him very well. And but it was obviously weird. We had no research to support it at first. However, today we have hundreds of research studies that support the effectiveness of this. Um, we have what are called meta-analyses, where you take a whole bunch of studies and you combine all the subjects. And I participated in one of them, which showed that actually tapping was a essential ingredient of the method working. They had excuse me, meta-analyses for trauma, for anxiety, for depression, and they show a strong benefit from this method. So, yeah, weird, but it works. So,
that's great.
so
And how often would you recommend this technique to be used? Is there a limit or a minimum? What are your thoughts on that?
well, first of all, I think usually if it's a relatively minor issue, okay, you're going to be able to do it on yourself. Sometimes you need the help of a coach or therapist who's trained in this approach, who takes you through it. Um, the interpersonal relationship where somebody's guiding you through it and so on, and they're respectful of you, and that's very beneficial. Okay, so sometimes with the really deep issues, we need some help.
Yeah.
Okay, so you never want to think self-help is the only way to go. If self-help doesn't do it, get other help too. Okay. And don't be afraid, don't be ashamed of that, because it's, people have something like they get a broken ankle. They don't just say, I'm going to fix it myself. They go to a doctor and
It's true.
they get it fixed. Same thing here. You go to a coach, you go to a therapist, you go to if you're necessary, a psychiatrist, whatever. Okay. But back to your question, how often should you use it? Well, first of all, there's no, you're not going to get negative side effects from using the tapping. I guess if you tap too hard, you'll have black and blue marks. Okay. So that may not be a good idea to tap too hard. You don't have to tap hard. You could, every time an issue comes up, you could tap on it. Matter of fact, one method, I was just talking to a client the other day about it, what Gary Craig called the personal peace procedure. And
Okay.
what you do is you list a whole bunch of things that bother you, different events or beliefs or whatever you have. And so let's say you had 20 of them that really kind of like get you. And then what you do is you start whittling away until each of those, you don't have to, you wouldn't try to do all 20 in a day. You might do one, you might do two. And then you check the next day. You see how you feel about those two. And if there's still something there, maybe you tap again. You would tap again. Why not? And you want to get it down to 1, 2, somewhere in there,
Yeah.
depending. If you can get it down to 1, there's hardly, or even less than 1. God bless you.
That's
Why not?
fantastic.
Why not do that? But then, and as you whittle those away, you have more and more presence.
Yes.
Because the more we're caught up in those negative states, it takes us away from the present, takes us away from our true power. And then you're going to hear health benefits,
Yeah.
So
That's fantastic.
you
That's
use it as much as you need to.
And the last question that I have for you before I let you go today, does this work for everybody?
No, nothing works for everybody. I always remember Roger Callahan saying to me, man, very wise man, he said, if anybody tells you that what they do works 100% of the time, there's one of two things. Either they're lying or they haven't seen enough people. Because
Good
if you
point.
see enough people, you're going to find that some things just don't work for some people. Well, that's why I like a toolbox. Okay.
Yes.
I like to have other tools. So if tapping works for a person, if the midline technique works for them, beautiful. If it doesn't work, maybe I go for what's called EFT. You tap eyebrow, side of the eye, under nose, under bottom lip, under collarbone, under arm, top of head. Okay. There's other troubleshooting techniques you can use there. There's the TFT approach, which is a different sequence of tapping. There's a variety of things like that. And then sometimes tapping isn't the answer. Some people don't want to tap. I have people come in, I don't want to do that tapping stuff. That's weird. I'll say, hey, whatever floats your boat, we don't have to tap. There's a lot of ways to do things. Okay. I said, but if you want to take a long time to work things out, I used to be very good at taking a long time. I would advise against a long time, but there are other things to do.
That is
But
fantastic.
and in terms of like, if people want a resource, a couple of resources. If you want a professional book, a highly professional book, you would read my first book, which was the second edition. It's called Energy Psychology, and the secondary title is Explorations at the Interface of Energy, Cognition, Behavior, and Health. It's a highfalutin kind of thing, but it lays out research and theory and all that. If you want something that's easier to digest, you could read my most recent book, which just came out last year, called The Tapping Toolbox.
which is fantastic, everyone. I am going to put the link in the resources below. I have read it, and it is not only a book, it is actually a workbook for you to use whenever you need.
Sure, yeah. The other thing is, we have, Nisha and I are planning on offering some more detailed trainings for you that'll go into more detail. You need, I've been studying this kind of thing since 1992. So there's a lot of years involved. Okay, there's a lot to learn. Okay, you don't have to learn all that. I mean, we can bring it down to a certain level where you'll get results. Okay, so I want to, for your health and happiness and success, I think this is a good thing to do. I think everybody wants to be able to do more in a way. And this makes it possible to do that. And so we're going to offer you some things that I think you'll find very delightful.